Hey everybody, this is day 3 of mental disorders, and we're going to get started on what this is a classification called trauma and stressor related disorders. There's only one that I really want to get into, PTSD. PTSD stands for post traumatic stress disorder. Now, think about what that means. Post means after. So, after trauma. So, what is trauma? Trauma, it could be a lot of things that I really don't want to talk about too much, but you could have been a victim of assault, and sexual assault. You could have witnessed something horrible. You witnessed somebody get murdered. Okay, you could have been the victim of infidelity. Okay, um, and also the most famous would be you were a soldier and you were serving in Iraq or somewhere else, and you get PTSD. The symptoms are flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety, inability to sleep, some really nasty stuff. I had a friend who taught economics at our school down in the portables, and a car pulled up next to his portable playing the bass, boom, boom, and he hit the deck. Like he just flashed back to Iraq, like he had to hit the deck. That was a flashback from PTSD. He did suffer from PTSD from serving in the Iraq War. Okay. Another example would be reactive attachment disorder under this classification. If you are a young child and you are neglected and you do not attach to someone who loves you, you could have reactive attachment disorder. So, if you're an orphan and you were neglected at a young age during that critical period for attachment, you could be 17 years old and not wanting a hug from people who care about you. You could, I knew of a person who it was a big deal for her to get a boyfriend and to be able to be touched by someone else, because if you were neglected at a young age, you could have what's called reactive attachment disorder. The movie which I recommend, Good Will Hunting, is about Will, and he has reactive attachment disorder. He was neglected and abused as a young orphan. Okay. Those are the two trauma and stressor related disorders. So, just again, PTSD, car crash, war, assault, those are traumas that could cause PTSD. Okay. How do you treat it? You could treat it with virtual reality therapy, where now this isn't Call of Duty here. This is an actual simulation based on what the soldier tells them happened that day. And they will actually create what looks like a video game, but it's based on what that soldier says happened on that day. They can create smells. They actually have a smell generator. They've got virtual reality goggles, and they got sounds, and the idea is it's like exposure therapy. It exposes you to what gives you anxiety, and then the therapist helps you to deal with that anxiety through exposure, through habituation. Okay. Oh, I didn't mean to give you the answer there. But anyway, Jan displays anxiety, irritability, inability to concentrate, and apathy. Apathy is you just don't care. So it's like emotional numbness. She also re experiences a disastrous event through nightmares and vivid memories. That's PTSD. Okay. All right. Now, it's a big definition. So let's talk about dissociative disorders. Think about the word association. Okay. So let's say you want to associate yourself with the band kids. So you hang out with the band kids, you wear band t shirts, you go to their events, you associate with the band kids. But let's say you don't like the band kids anymore, so you don't associate with them. disassociate yourself from them. All right, now, let's say a trauma happens to you. Now, you could have PTSD, all right, no doubt about it. But one thing you could do is you could dissociate yourself from yourself, or you dissociate yourself from the trauma. So let's say you were assaulted and you say, that assault didn't happen to me. That assault happened to one of my other personalities. Or you could forget that the assault ever happened. That would be dissociative amnesia. So these are the 3 dissociative disorders that I teach. You've got dissociative identity disorder, DID is for short. That's when you get multiple personalities. Dissociative amnesia, now Freud called that repression, but in modern day we call it dissociative amnesia. So let's say a trauma happens to you and you don't remember the trauma. That's repression, or that's dissociative amnesia. You don't remember it. Now, dissociative amnesia with fugue, when you see the word fugue, think of the word fugitive. You leave. So let's say you're in a car accident and you get up, you don't remember who you are, and you start walking. And you might even get in a car and drive away. It may last for 2 days, it may last for a month. This is very rare, but when it does happen, it's called dissociative amnesia with fugue. All 3 of these are caused by trauma. So a trauma happens to you, you could say, that trauma didn't happen to me, that happened to one of my other alters, one of my other personalities. Or you could say, I don't remember the trauma. That's dissociative amnesia. Or you could say, I don't remember the trauma, and so I'm taking on a new identity. I am no longer Cheryl. I don't remember who I am, and I'm going to go on a journey and go walk down the street, or I may get a job sweeping floors in a Kentucky gas station. That's called dissociative amnesia with fugue. I don't have students write this down, but depersonalization, it's almost like you're looking, it's like Super Mario, you're looking down at your own character. Sometimes it's a side effect of drugs or medications. That's called depersonalization. Okay. I read a story about a student whose parents were fighting all the time. And so she just went totally numb. And so she didn't feel any kind of emotion whatsoever. That is an example of depersonalization as well. I don't know if they're exactly the same, but it's another use of the word, definitely. No, that's dissociation. It's dissociation. Anyway, dissociative identity disorder is just having multiple personalities. We watched the show United States of Terror. As of this second, it's on Hulu. I've seen the show. It's a good show. You should watch it. Multiple personalities. Dissociative amnesia. I use Jason Bourne as an example. That could be dissociative amnesia with fugue. But I don't. Anyway, the point is that you don't remember the trauma that happened to you. Okay. So this picture here is from 9/11, the September 11th of 2001 attacks. And imagine that kind of trauma, how some people just don't remember everything. Of course, you have flashbulb memories where everybody remembers everything, but sometimes it's so traumatic that your brain blocks it out and you don't remember it. We call that dissociative amnesia. Dissociative amnesia is not the result of medical, not brain damage. So if you get brain damage and you forget, that's a different kind of amnesia. We'll call that retrograde amnesia, not dissociative amnesia. So dissociative amnesia is not caused by trauma or psychological. It's not caused by trauma to the head. It's caused by psychological trauma. That's the difference. How do you treat amnesia? You show pictures. You take them to their house, give them smells, let them listen to music from their childhood. That's true with all kinds of amnesia. Dissociative amnesia with fugue is when you go on a journey of some kind. Like, think of the word fugitive. This is the stuff of soap operas. It's very rare, but when it happens, this is what we call it. So I suppose this is where we get a lot of silver alerts, but people will take on new identities. This is crazy stuff, I know, but it's rare. But it's like if you leave the scene of the trauma and you don't remember who you are, we call that a fugue state. In the beginning of season 2 of Breaking Bad, Walter White faked a fugue state by walking around the grocery store in his underwear. Okay, so check this out. Following the failure of his business, Dan disappeared and was discovered 2 years later in another state practicing dentistry without license. When questioned, he responded that he had found himself in a strange city and could not remember any personal information. That would be dissociative amnesia with fugue. Sorry I ruined it for you. All right. Okay, there's a lot of information on here. Somatic symptom and related disorders. That is the classification. That's what the DSM-5 calls it. Now, I want you to understand that the word soma means body. So when you look at the word somatic, then you see the word body in there. It has something to do with your body. What a lot of this broad classification of disorders, and these are crazy, but it's basically your mind can create bodily symptoms. Okay, so in class, what I do is I play a prank on my students. I say, hey class, everybody, I hate to tell you this, but there was a student in this classroom just a couple of hours ago who had lice. And then I act like I'm all freaked out. I even Google pictures of lice and show it to my students. And then I watch everyone just sit there and itch, scratch. And then I reveal the answer later that there was no lice. Why would I do something like that? Because I want you to know that your mind can create bodily symptoms. Imagine if I told you that the person who was at your desk just yesterday had Ebola or maybe coronavirus or something, and then you start making up symptoms in your head. You don't even know the symptoms, and you start feeling a backache and you start feeling cold chills and stuff. And then you find out later that I lied to you, and you're like, wow, your mind just created a whole lot of symptoms. When your mind creates symptoms for a non-existent disease, we call that somatic symptom disorder. Okay? It's like there's nothing wrong with you, but your body creates the symptoms. Okay? A similar disorder is hysterical pregnancy. You might have heard of women who get obsessed about getting pregnant, and then they actually think that they are pregnant. And some women, they actually start showing a little bit. And then they talk about how they'll make up symptoms. They don't even know what it's like to be pregnant. Their nipples are sore. They'll get hot flashes or whatever. They don't even know what it's like to be pregnant, but they get so obsessed. And sometimes they'll read about it online and learn the symptoms, and then they start to create the symptoms. Think of it as like a placebo effect. You know how like you take a pill and somebody tells you what that pill is going to make you high, and you start acting high. Well, it's the same thing. It's mind over body. Okay. So somatic symptom disorder, people get obsessed and histrionic and develop actual bodily symptoms. It could be nerve damage. It could be feeling cold or itching when there isn't anything to be itchy about. That's somatic symptom disorder. Okay. Conversion disorder sounds a lot like what I just told you. Conversion disorder is the loss of bodily function when there's nothing wrong with your body. So, for example, conversion blindness. Imagine you're a soldier in war and there's a lot of really bad stuff going on and you go blind. You can't see. But there's nothing wrong with your eyes. It's all in your head. We call that conversion blindness. Or let's say you're a soldier and you're scared and your legs stop working. That's conversion disorder. When a part of your body stops working and it's all in your head. That's called conversion disorder. So, which of the following types of disorders is characterized by complaints of bodily symptoms that do not have a detectable medical cause, but rather are caused by psychological factors? That's a classification. We call that somatic symptom. No, that's a specific disorder. We call that somatic symptom disorder. Okay. Illness anxiety disorder. We used to call this hypochondria. Now, remember the giraffe from Madagascar? He was a hypochondriac. It's when you think you're sick, but you're not. And these people, they will get online, they'll get on WebMD, and they will learn about all kinds of crazy disorders that there's no way that they could have. And then when they read about the disorders, they might actually start feeling the disorders, which kind of sounds like another illness. It sounds like somatic symptom. But these people, what they'll do is they'll take a little freckle and they'll go, oh my God, skin cancer. And then they'll run to the dermatologist. Or they'll get a little cough, a little sore throat from allergies because of allergies. And then they'll go to the doctor and say, I have coronavirus, I have Ebola or something. And they go to the hospital a lot. We call this illness anxiety disorder. We used to call it hypochondria. Okay? And the internet has made this worse. Okay. An individual diagnosed as having a conversion disorder would be most likely to show, and the answer is C, biologically unfounded loss of bodily functioning. So a part of your legs stop working or your eyes stop working. Okay? Craig is sure something is wrong with him, even though his doctor has not found any physiological basis for his complaints. He returns to the doctor every few weeks to report symptoms of new illnesses based on information he reads. So he's a hypochondriac. Craig has illness anxiety disorder. But how do you classify that? And the answer is D. That's the classification. He has illness anxiety disorder. Kara witnessed a violent burglary. Shortly after the event, she was unable to see. The doctors could not find anything wrong with her eyes. So she has conversion blindness, conversion disorder. All right. So which of the following psychological disorders is correctly paired with the appropriate classification? So you need to be able to classify psychological disorders. And all of these are wrong except for E. Post-traumatic stress is classified as a trauma and stressor-related disorder. Okay. All right. I have never seen these on the AP exam, but I'll go over them anyway. These are called feeding and eating disorders. So now I'll be honest with you. I look at the DSM and I get more confused after reading what it says. But these are the basics. Anorexia involves restriction of calories. Starving yourself to below 85% of your minimum body weight. These guys, they will, it's mostly girls, okay? Sometimes they will exercise a lot, and they will not eat. When you have dinner with an anorexia, what they'll do is they'll poke at their food and it looks like they're eating, but they're not. Okay. Sometimes they'll take their food and then they'll spit it out into a napkin and then excuse themselves to the bathroom and flush it. Okay. They are trying to not eat. Okay. Bulimia is when involves binging and purging. Binge eating is when you eat massive amounts of food. So bulimics, they eat, okay? They eat, and sometimes they eat a lot of food. And so they'll just eat. They'll eat a whole large pizza by themselves or two large pizzas by themselves. And then they'll go into the bathroom and throw it up. And this is really hard on the teeth because hydrochloric acid does eat away at your enamel. Sometimes they will take laxatives so they can poop it out the other end. Okay? That's the basics of anorexia and bulimia. Okay? If Google DSM-5 anorexia or bulimia if you want more. Also on Netflix, there is a show called To the Bone. And it's a good show. It got Keanu Reeves in it, and you will learn a lot about eating disorders in that show. Okay? Both can suffer from body dysmorphic disorders because when they look in the mirror, what they see does not match objective reality. So you've got, first of all, you got this girl who is very super skinny, way too skinny. She looks in the mirror and she thinks that what she sees is fat. And the girl in the mirror looks great, okay? She's not fat at all, but the girl who's looking in the mirror thinks of herself as being fat. And that's not fat at all. So the point is that she's not in reality. That's what we call body dysmorphic disorder. Okay? Binge eating disorder involves eating massive amounts of food. The DSM says twice a week, but you don't purge it. You don't throw it up. You just eat it. And you probably get fat. Not necessarily, but you probably gain a lot of weight from this. We call that binge eating disorder. Okay? And I think the DSM says twice a week. Okay? All right. So, correlations of eating disorders. Women with eating disorders commonly have hyper controlling parents. That's not always true, but that's partially true. It does tend to run in families. So, that brings up the question, is this nature or is it nurture? We don't know. We don't know. It's a mystery and it's very hard to treat. If you ever wanted, as you know from To the Bone, there are entire clinics that are dedicated to people with eating disorders. Okay. So, which of the following types of disorders is characterized by complaints of bodily symptoms that do not have a detectable medical cause, but rather are caused by psychological factors? We call that somatic symptom disorders. Okay. A conversion disorder is most closely associated with which more general type of disorder? That's a classification question. You got to be able to classify disorders. A man who experiences sudden blindness on witnessing the death of his wife, but his eyes work just fine, we call that conversion disorder. All right, let's talk about schizophrenia. And this is a huge category. We call that a psychotic disorder. Now, let me tell you what psychosis is. Being psychotic means that you hear voices of things that don't exist, and you see hallucinations of things that don't exist. Okay? How prevalent is schizophrenia? It's about 1%. So if you take our high school, which is about 2,200 students, then that means 22 people in the school might have schizophrenia at what point in their lives. What causes schizophrenia? It is a problem with dopamine receptors. Okay? In a way, it means too much dopamine. If you look at these PET scans on this picture, you can see the difference between schizophrenic patients and healthy volunteers. There's more activity in what are called the ventricles, and that's where a lot of dopamine receptors are in the brain. It is partially genetic, so it does run in families, and it's more of a genetic disease. You don't pick up on it by watching your parents, so it's nature, it's not nurture. And these holes in your brain are called ventricles. And schizophrenic patients do have enlarged brain ventricles. Okay. So here's an MRI of two identical twins. The one on the right has schizophrenia, and the one on the left doesn't have schizophrenia. So that shows that schizophrenia isn't totally genetic, because if you have one twin that has it and one twin that doesn't, then that means it's not totally genetic. Okay? What are the symptoms? Positive symptoms of schizophrenia include things that are there that you don't want to be there. Positive symptoms include hallucinations. That means you see things that don't exist, or you hear things that don't exist. Delusions. A delusion is a false behavior. Like, think of like denial. Okay, denial is when you say something isn't true when it is. A delusion is kind of the same thing. A delusion is when you say something is true that isn't. So, for example, if your girlfriend leaves you, she hasn't called you in months, and you say, "Oh, she'll be back. She loves me." Dude, you're being delusional. Okay? Or if the Cowboys are having a really bad season, you say, "Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl." And you're like, you're kind of being delusional. Like Cowboy fans tend to be delusional. Disorganized thoughts, paranoia, confusion when you see something that isn't there, or paranoia, you think the mailman is part of a plot to get you. Those are positive symptoms. Positive means that there's something there that you don't want to be there. Negative symptoms. Negative means that there's something missing that you want to be there. For example, there's something called the flat effect. So if you have schizophrenia and you just sit there like all day long and you have no emotion, that's called flat effect. And that is one symptom of schizophrenia. Catatonia. When you're being catatonic, it could mean that you have flat effect and you're just sitting there staring into space. Or it could mean that you're repeating yourself a lot. Think about the show Stranger Things Season 2, Eleven's mom. And her mom was sitting there repeating these numbers, 13, 26, bunny rabbit. She kept repeating these things over and over and over again. Eleven's mom was catatonic. Okay? That doesn't mean she had schizophrenia. I'm just trying to teach you what catatonic means. So you've got disorganized thinking. It could cause confusion. This one I have trouble. It could mean that you have fragmented and bizarre false beliefs. Okay? False beliefs are delusions, delusions of persecution. The government is out to get me, or the mailman is out to get me. Okay? Delusions of grandeur. Think grande, big. I am the second coming of Jesus Christ. Or if you think some celebrity is in love with you when you've never even met that celebrity, that would be a delusion of grandeur. You can have them without being schizophrenic, but that is what a delusion of grandeur is. Remember, hallucinations are a symptom of schizophrenia. If you hear voices coming from the television and these voices are talking to you, that could be that is definitely a hallucination. Okay? If you think that your dog is talking to you and you talk back to your dog and you're having real conversations back and forth, that is a hallucination. So, delusional thinking is central to which of the following? Schizophrenia. Bernice says, I am the ruler of Xylomek, and I have come to your planet to marry my longtime lover, who has been communicating to me through the television waves. Bernice is being delusional. And there is a disorder called delusional disorder where you have these delusions, but you're not schizophrenic. If you have delusions without the hallucinations, we call that delusional disorder. Okay. Inappropriate actions and emotions, laughing at inappropriate times, like going to a funeral and laughing, flat affect, senseless compulsive acts, catatonia, all of these are symptoms of schizophrenia. Hallucinations. Check out this PET scan. What's going on in the PET scan? Well, you see more activity in the back of your head. That's your visual cortex. So this person with schizophrenia is having a visual hallucination while being in a PET scan. Other facts, men do get it earlier and more often than women. So men sometimes will get it when they hit 16, 17 years old. Women tend to wait till they're in their early 20s to get it. For some reason, schizophrenics live in cities. We think it could possibly have to do with all the stimulation that you get. It could be air pollution, not likely, but it's possible. Schizophrenics do smoke a lot, and I mean cigarettes, marijuana. They do drink alcohol a lot. That doesn't mean that it causes schizophrenia, but it could mean that they're self-medicating. Self-medication. I mean, they face it. If you're hearing voices all the time that are telling you to kill yourself, you might smoke a lot of weed too, and you might do a lot of drugs too. So, a psychologist who bases his diagnosis on a man's mental disorder primarily on the presence of hallucinations and delusions, that's schizophrenia. How do you treat it? Well, since schizophrenia involves psychosis, then you treat it with an antipsychotic medication. Okay? So if you take these medicines, then it's possible that you have a psychotic medication. Sometimes it's an injection. Andrea Yates, who drowned her 5 children because she thought that the devil was coming after her children, she did not have schizophrenia, but she did have postpartum depression with psychosis. And she took an antipsychotic medication. Okay. There's also TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they shoot magnetic pulses into your brain, and it does a really good job of getting rid of the voices. I don't teach a lot about this stuff, but I do recommend the Netflix show Atypical if you want to. It's a really good show. It's about a kid with autism, and autism is classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder, as well as ADHD, conduct disorder, kids acting really bad and destroying things, intellectual disability, cognitive disabilities, people with very low IQs. And then you've got neurocognitive disorders, which include Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and drug addictions are classified as neurocognitive disorders. Okay. All right, guys, that is it. Hope that was helpful to you.